course, you know, I talk about this every week, the power of the spoken word, and I know you probably get kind of tired of it, but it seems to go with just about everything we ever talk about. But as I was preparing for this talk, I found a story that I really am I'm kind of shifted from the spoken word, which I haven't, but I am going to talk to you this morning about celebrating the good in our lives. And of course, like I said, we've got 4 more days till Thanksgiving. And, you know, we've had some tough times this last 2 years. People we loved have died or been sick, and we haven't been able to travel, and it's been a very unusual time for us in this country. And many of us have lived our whole lives and never had anything even close to what we've experienced in the last 2 years. So when I found this little story, I decided that I would tell it. I told it once a very long time ago, and I kind of had forgotten it, but I am going to, I'm going to tell it this morning. It was Thanksgiving week, and a lady named Sandra was on the verge of tears. Her heart was heavy as she walked into the florist shop. She was feeling really depressed. Thanksgiving is the week that her baby boy would have been born, but in the 4th month of her pregnancy, she was in an automobile accident and had a miscarriage. Then her husband lost his job. And now she had just learned that her beloved sister, who was her favorite, would not be coming to her home for Thanksgiving that year. Even worse, Sandra had a friend who infuriated her by suggesting that her grief was a God-given path to spiritual awakening that would allow her to empathize with others who suffer. Now, in Unity, we call that metaphysical malpractice. Don't do it. Even as ministers, we don't do it. But anyway, this is part of her story. And so she said, how dare we? How dare this woman, who has been my friend all this time, preaches to me like this? She has no idea what I'm going through. It may be Thanksgiving, but I really don't have anything to be thankful for. But she still wanted to have the flowers for her Thanksgiving dinner. So according to Sandra's friend, she should be grateful that accident was a minor one, that the airbag saved her life so that the rest of her family and children had her. And then standing there waiting for the florist to work for her and get her order, she heard the florist say, "Good afternoon, may I help you?" And with deep, deep sadness in her voice, Sandra said, "I need an arrangement." "What would you like?" the clerk inquired. "Something that conveys gratitude, something that is ordinary, or would you like my Thanksgiving special?" "Not exactly," Sandra blurted out. "In the last 5 months, everything that could go wrong has gone wrong in my life. I don't really have anything right now to be thankful for." Sandra regretted her outburst and was surprised when the shop clerk said, "I have the perfect arrangement for you." And then the bell on the door of the florist shop rang, and the clerk said hello to another customer that walked in. And the clerk said, "Hi, Mary, let me get your order." The clerk went to her workroom and quickly reappeared, carrying an arrangement of greenery, bows, and long-stemmed thorns. No roses, no rose blooms, no flowers, just thorny stems, some greenery, and some bows. Now, Susan, I know you're cringing with that right now. Our florist is with us this morning. You want this in a box? Asked the clerk. Sandra watched for the customer's response, and Sandra thought, is this a joke? It's not a very funny joke. Who would want rose stems with no flowers? She waited for the laughter, but neither woman laughed. Yes, please, said the other customer. You'd think after 3 years of getting the Thanksgiving special, I wouldn't be so moved by its significance, but I can feel it right here in my chest all over again. Sandra stammered. That lady just left with no flowers? Right, said the clerk. I cut off the flowers. That's the Thanksgiving special. I call it the Thanksgiving thorns bouquet. Sandra said to the woman, oh, come on, you can't tell me people actually pay for that. Clerk said, yes, Mary came into the shop 3 years ago feeling very sorry for herself, much like you feel today. She thought she had nothing to be thankful for. She lost her father to cancer, the family business was failing, her son was into drugs, and she was facing major surgery. That same year, said the clerk, I had lost my husband. And for the first time in my life, I had just spent the holidays alone. I had no children, no husband, no family nearby, and I was in so much debt, I couldn't afford to travel. So what did you do? Sandra asked. I learned to be thankful for the thorns, said the clerk. I've always been grateful for the good things in my life, and I never ask why those good things happen to me. But boy, when you have the bad stuff hit, I really started asking, why me? And getting down in the dumps. It took a while for me to learn that dark times are important. I've always loved the flowers of life, but it took thorns to show me the beauty of life. But you know, it's only when we can see the ugly that we appreciate the beauty. It's only when we feel the pain that the good times really impact us. If you've never known the depths, you cannot begin to value the heights. Sandra could hear her own breathing as she began to understand that this was what her well-meaning friend had been trying to tell her. I guess the truth is, I don't really want to see beauty right now. I've lost a child, and I'm angry with God. Just then, someone else walked into the shop. Hey, Phil, shouted the clerk to the man walking in. Phil said, hi. Are we having an issue? Are we having a problem? Oh, okay. Right, yeah. The angels were.
It's all right.
My wife sent me in to get our usual Thanksgiving arrangement. 12 thorny, long stems, laughed Phil as the clerk handed him a tissue-wrapped arrangement from the refrigerator. Sandra said to the man, those are for your wife? Do you mind me asking why she wants something that looks like that? No, I'm glad you asked, Phil said. 4 years ago, my wife and I nearly divorced. After 40 years, we were in a real mess, but with the love and the grace of God's guidance, we slogged through our problems, problem after problem, and breathed new life into our marriage. Jenny, this wonderful clerk here, told me that she kept a vase of thorny stems to remind her of what she had learned about her thorny times. So that was good enough for me. I took some of those stems home. My wife and I decided to label each stem for a specific problem we were having and to give thanks for what that problem taught us. So as Phil paid the clerk, he turned and said to Sandra, I highly recommend the Thanksgiving special. I don't know if I can be thankful for the thorns in my life, Sandra said to the clerk and to Phil. It's all too fresh right now. Well, the clerk replied carefully, my experience has shown me that stems with only thorns make us remember that life is more precious. As they talked, tears rolled down Sandra's cheeks, and for the first time since the accident, she loosened her grip a bit on her resentments. She reluctantly said, I'll take those 12 long stem thorns, please. I'd hoped you would, the clerk told Sandra. I'll have them ready in a minute. Thank you. I owe you, Sandra said. How much? Nothing but a promise to allow gratitude to heal your heart, said the clerk. The first year's arrangement is always on me. The clerk smiled and handed a card to Sandra. I'll attach the card to your arrangement, but you might want to read it first. The card read, may I always have gratitude for the roses and the thorns of my life. May I always be aware of the good in my life, even when bad things happen. May I always trust the unconditional love of God enough to look for the blessing and the lesson, even in the worst of challenges. Great little story, makes you stop and think. You know, we're all like Sandra. It's easy for all of us to allow ourselves to sink deeply into some sort of a depression when things happen that rock our world. Some of us have been through that in the last couple of years, now and again. It's pretty easy to forget, even in the midst of the major challenges of our lives, that we still have a choice to look at all of our life, all of the good and the not good that we've been given, all the sadness and the despair. If we only look at the sadness and the despair, it only breeds more sadness and more despair, and pretty soon it can overcome us and take us out of our own comfort zone, can take over our personality. We humans have a tendency to want to look at and focus on what's been changed or altered or taken away, and to overlook the many parts of our life that are still so good. This little story gives us an opportunity to look at some of the things in Sandra's life that she could have been grateful for still. The auto accident could have taken her or some of the other children. Her beloved sister, who couldn't make the trip, was still in good health, just unable to visit at this particular time. Her husband had not been transferred, and even though he had a new job, he was healthy, and all of her other children were healthy. So just as we increase our despair and sink ourselves into a deeper depression, we can also increase our blessings when we are grateful for the good things that are still in our life. The experience in the florist shop changed Sandra's outlook and her energy, and reminded her that she still had choices about how she looked at her life. Now, I never suggest to people that they avoid their grief. Grief is totally normal. We have to go through our grief. We have to feel our feelings and feel our sadness. At the same time, we can and we must acknowledge our good. We can feel sad and still notice our good at the same time. We're capable of doing both. We can feel our grief, we can acknowledge our good, and we should. It's part of the healing process. It's totally possible. In the Bible, in the book of Job, another story about people's grief and bad luck. Job, if you remember that story, was a very good man. He was very prosperous. He had a beautiful family of 7 sons and 3 daughters. In the story, he has all kinds of animals, and he's very, very wealthy, camels and oxen, and he's a very wealthy guy. It says in my history that the book of Job was originally a poem, and it was meant to make a point. And in the poem, it was about God and Satan talking to one another, and Satan giving him his giving his opinion to God about how fickle Job would be if things were not going right for him. In the poem, Satan says, Job is pious only because God has put a wall around him and blessed his favorite human with prosperity of all good things. But if God were to stretch out his hand and destroy everything that Job had, then Job would surely curse God. So God gives Satan permission to test Job's righteousness, and all of Job's possessions are destroyed. All his oxen, all his children, every bit of his wealth was destroyed. All of his children were killed. And still, so the story goes, Job did not curse God. And all he would say to his friends was, blessed be the Lord. As Job endures all these calamities without turning away from God, he suffers personally with a dreadful disease. And his wife tells him, curse God and die. But Job answers, you speak as one of the foolish speak. Besides, we shall have good from life, and we will also have some evil from life. This is how life is. So then, in the story, I don't know if any of you remember this story, but Satan sends three friends of Job's to try to talk him into being angry at God and cursing God. And God responds to the 3 friends saying, there's so many things Job does not know about how this world was formed and how nature works, that Job should consider God as being greater than anything he's experiencing and strong enough to overcome any of his challenges. And then God rebukes the 3 friends, saying, I'm angry with you. You have not spoken of what is right. You all give Job advice about how he should turn his back on God. And believe me, Job is tempted, yet he does not. He stays grateful for the good in his life and in his past. It's a long story. The whole book of Job is strictly about this story. But it ends with Job restored to perfect health, with newborn children and a new family, and 2 times as much livestock and land and houses as he had before. So in the book of Job, in chapter 42, verse 10, it reads, and the Lord restored the fortunes of Job and gave him twice as much as before. And the Lord blessed the latter days of his life more than his beginning. His new children were more fair and loving, and Job lived 140 years and died an old man full of love for all his years. And of course, the story is meant to be about gratitude being a multiplier of our good. The more we can be grateful, the more we can look for the good, which is sometimes hard to find, the more good will show up. Now, from this quantum physics part that we talk about so frequently, this is why. It's holding that space of positivity and then having more good come our way. We increase the results of our future good when we're grateful before we see the good. This is hard to do, but this is what Jesus taught. And if you look at all the stories about Jesus, when he would pray, he would give thanks before he saw the results. He was so sure that the good would come that he gave thanks in advance. And it's clear from the story of Job that he did the same thing. He was thankful before he saw anything good manifest in his life. And it was pretty grim while he was going through his own illness and the loss of all of his wealth and all of his family. And yet, Job had trusted the wisdom of God even in the bad times. There's a knowing if we allow it, and a saying if we remember it, and this too shall pass. This too shall pass. And it always does. There's a place in the Bible where it says this has come to pass. It hasn't come to stay, it's come to pass. And so it's a wonderful thing for us to remember. And when you read the stories of Jesus, especially Lazarus comes to my mind, he gave thanks ahead of time because he was so sure that when he got there 3 days later, Lazarus would be alive. And yet, they had already buried him. But in the story, Jesus gives thanks for his being alive. And so he is brought back to life. The story of Lazarus is quite interesting too. His two good friends who were Lazarus's sisters were really angry at him, and they really met him on the road when he got there, and they were really giving him the dickens. But he just said, he'll be fine, and he was. This is what we hold in our mind. When we hold the good in our mind, the good will show up. They called it faith back then. We call it quantum physics today, but it's the same thing. What we put out into this quantum soup we swim in is what comes back to us. So if we can take the good and look at it and call it good, even when it's not feeling very good, that's what we'll get. That's what will come back to us. It's taking the high road. It's thinking in that higher self of ourselves, in that spiritual self of us. Because if we think it's going to turn out badly, guess what? It's going to turn out badly. Because we will have created it with our thinking. So, wherever you are in your life right now, we all have disappointments. We all have things we wish wouldn't happen. But this is a week for Thanksgiving. This is a week for gratitude, for finding the blessings in the thorns and in the roses, and allowing ourselves to see both sides of that coin. So my thought for you this week is to look for the good, even when it doesn't look and feel so good. Trust that life reaches us all and knows that we will all experience the good and the not so good at some time in our lives. Most of us can look back, though, and see that when the bad hit, it turned to good later on. You can always see the good in it later. Doesn't feel so good while you're going through it. One of my teachers, who was a licensed Unity teacher in Houston, and she was a nun, and she had left the convent to join Unity and be one of my very best teachers. And she used to say, pain is inevitable, but misery is optional. And I always like to remember that. Pain is inevitable, but misery is optional. So we get to choose. We get to choose from moment to moment how we look at whatever comes our way. And we can look for that rainbow. Maybe we don't see it yet. Maybe it's a little cloudy right now. But we can remember there's always so much in our lives to be grateful for. And to always remember to look at our glass as half full, not half empty. And be grateful as we look around those who are less fortunate. There's always somebody less fortunate than us. And when we do, we can see the joys in our own lives. So, I don't know, Susan, can we come get a dozen thorn stems from you?
Got a lot of those.
You like that idea? Go see Susan over at Lulu. She might have some long stem thorns for you. So, sometimes that is what it takes for us to remember. And Myrtle Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, said this, and it's something I always remember to say, and that is that if you could only ever pray one prayer, let it be a prayer of gratitude. And I learned later he didn't coin that phrase. There was somebody way before him, like Aristotle or somebody, that coined that phrase. But it was one thing that Myrtle Fillmore always said, if you could only ever pray one prayer, let it be a prayer of gratitude. So as we realize we get to choose what we're grateful for, how we look at our adversities, how we can allow ourselves to love, to grow and learn from our adversities. As you move through this week, kind of think about the Thanksgiving special of long stem thorns. And think about finding the good in the roses and the thorns, and try to remember to be thankful for it all. So let's just move into a place now of reflection. Just take a deep breath, and you may want to lay things aside. And as you take a few deep breaths, just allow yourself to be fully present in the room and feel the spirit in the room. And think about what's been said here today and about this sweet little story. Each of us here has had the thorns in our lives and the burdens. We've had the losses, we've had the disappointments. In every lifetime, we'll have those good times and the not so good times. This week of Thanksgiving, this time of gratitude, this time of introspection of all that we can be thankful for, it's a good time to let go. Whatever it is that you're holding on to that keeps you from your joy and your bliss, it keeps you from remembering to be grateful. Whatever that is, bring it to your mind right now. And just say to yourself, I make a choice right now today to let this go. Whatever it is, I let it go. It no longer serves me. whatever that is that makes you sad or brings up old feelings of negativity, just say to yourself, I can't afford a negative thought. None of us can afford a negative thought. When we create a negative thought, we create an outshowing, a manifestation in our life of some form of negativity. It's what happens in our quantum field. So we let it all go. We choose a week of Thanksgiving. We choose to know that what this is, whatever it is, has come to pass. It hasn't come to stay. And so we let it go and look for the good. Know that looking for the good is a choice. We get to choose. So this week, as we move through Thanksgiving, with friends, with family, perhaps alone if we don't have that opportunity this year, still think of the wonderful things that we have in our life to be grateful for. Make this a week of gratitude. And so it is. Amen. And together our prayer for protection. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is and all is well.